What are the most unsafe work practices you have witnessed? A guy I used to work with at a fruit and veg store liked to throw the machetes for one spin and catch them. The same guy also liked to do C before work. The same guy had to find a new job when he lost his finger in a cauliflower pallet. Place was a freaking crack house with lettuce. Minimum wage work is grim. I learned to juggle knives in the produce department of a grocery store. Also learned a ceiling fan can't cut an orange at any speed. There was a flood in the basement of our bar where the beer was kept. I was sent in with a shop vac and a frayed extension cord to suck up the beer fridge flood water, one vacuum load at a time, with frayed extension cord balanced perilously above the water on beer cases, and then told to dump the water down a massive hole in another part of the basement that led into the foundation. Yeah, frick that. You're literally ruining the building. Worked in a school in a special needs program. This was a middle school age program, but most of the kids weren't toilet trained. We'd have accidents in the room almost daily and staff pretty much got into the routine of cleaning it up on our own if it was just pee. We figured can't call the janitors down here 4 times a day. That alone I'm pretty sure is an OSHA violation as none of us are properly trained. As of last year though, janitors were getting pee off that they were being called down to clean up little crap storms. Sorry, nothing I can do if a kid comes into school already with a full freaking pull-up of crap and he goes apeshit when he comes into school because it's probably uncomfortable as heck. So our supervisor went in to handle this with the school janitors and came back with a very lovely solution. Okay, so from now on we're just cleaning this all up by ourselves. Yay. No, I'm not. Sorry, not my job. You already pay well below the average for aides in the states and we're in a rich district. We don't even have the supplies to handle this safely in our room. We usually use baby wipes. I will absolutely not be handling this completely untrained. So I left that school for the same position in a neighboring school district where everything is by the books. I actually get health insurance and about a 50% pay bump to be 5 steps lower. Last I heard this crap keeps getting worse. Sounds about right. Some employers just blow my mind. People who know what they're worth will go get it, and they are all surprised when they're stuck with horrible employees. I work in a warehouse and we used to have a maintenance man that was pretty crazy. There are a couple of stories that come to mind, but my favorite has to be the time he was trying to take apart this very old press brake that's around 12 feet tall so we could scrap sell it off. At one point there was a motor that wouldn't come off that was located near the top of the machine. After about an hour or 2 of trying to pry the sumbitch off with whatever method he could think of, he decided that he needed to ram it with a forklift. Usually I'm not in the area that he is supposed to be working, but there is no way in heck I was going to miss this golden opportunity to witness something truly magnificent as someone jousting a machine. He took off on the forklift like only a true knight of Camelot would and smashed forks first right into the machine. Unfortunately for the story, nothing really exciting happened. He just rammed it and there was a lot of bouncing on his end. Not the first or last time I watched that man work and asked myself, am I going to watch Larry die today? Of course he was named Larry. I worked at one company for about 10 years. From the time I was hired until about 8 years in, the company was involved in a lawsuit. Some guy had removed some machine safeties and got one of his hands cut off. You would think that the company would have learned, but I was tasked to write control software for a saw system. The software controlled all aspects of the saw. One of the things we programmed in was the ability to connect remotely to the system to see some diagnostics values. Nothing harmful in that, right? Well, the upper level management insisted that I program in the ability to connect to the saw system and take over running the saw regardless of what the operator was doing at the time. I pointed out that someone in a sealed room would be able to do whatever they wanted and the machine operator would be in a dangerous situation. And if I was the operator, I would find a way to figure out who did it and kick their butt for them. Management decided that it would be perfectly safe to start running a saw system without being able to actually see the machine or communicate with the machine operator. I refused. Probably contributed to getting laid off, but would do it again. I'm a CNC machinist and the idea of someone being able to start my machine remotely is terrifying and infuriating. I 100% would hunt someone down and introduce my foot to their butt. Thanks for not letting it happen. As a new nurse I was hired at a small hem-onc blood disorders and cancer medicine clinic. There were multiple things they did wrong, but a few stuck out. I saw the nurse who was training me uncap an IV needle with her teeth. None of the practices I had learned in school, gowns and double gloves for especially toxic chemo drugs, were put into place. The 2 employees who had been there the longest had both been diagnosed with cancer. I quit pretty quickly. Please tell me you reported them to OSHA, the health board. I heard this story of a refinery expansion. They required a very large crane, and there are only a few of these in the US. The crane operator had a huge beard and demanded the ability to smoke while he ran the crane. The refinery had a no beard policy, and you can't smoke in one, so they demanded a new crane operator, but he was the only one available for like 4 months. They ended up setting up a special exemption area for this guy, but if there were any gas leaks or releases, Beardman was fricked. It's funny to imagine Beardman telling this story to his buddy in a bar somewhere. So I told these pansy suckers, frick you. I keep my frickin' beard and I fricking smoke when I want. If you don't like it, frick you. And went back to work. Clinks bottles. Ed. SP. I'm gonna cheat here, because I only saw the aftermath. A friend in high school worked at Wendy's, and she was doing cleaning. There was a vent that needed cleaning, so she climbed onto the counter. This counter happened to be the one right next to the deep fryer. Her foot slips, and she is mid-calf deep into the deep fryer that was still on. She had her foot wrapped up for a long while after that, but showed me her foot. Yeah, don't make people stand on top of counters to clean anything. Ever. There's a lot that can go wrong. Falling into a deep fryer is one of my fears now. Was in Spain with So and her family, and wanted to buy ice cream. Was looking forward to 3 scoops of tastriful cold. Right behind the counter a fluorescent lamp dropped from the ceiling and exploded into shards. Some fell into the ice. The people behind the counter removed the visible pieces of glass, but otherwise did nothing. Did not eat ice cream that day. The insides of the lights also contain mercury vapor and phosphor, so good choice. Employees would plug in electric space heaters, brought in from home, because management kept the heat set too low, 52 degrees. Trouble is, the building had outdated electric service and wiring. Workers would smell insulation starting to get hot just before circuit breakers would trip or a screw-in fuse would blow. Just put a quarter into the fuse box and you'll never blow another fuse. I was on a photo assignment at a cedar shake mill in northern Vancouver Island in BC. That's a place where they make cedar shakes for roofing. There I saw some of the craziest workplace dangers I've ever seen. First was the bucking floor where the logs are cut to length. This is done with several guys standing on a slick stainless steel floor with large chains running across it that pull huge logs into the corner where, after an all clear signal is given, I crap you not, 6-foot diameter spinning saw blade with teeth laid 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 with it goes through a 3-foot diameter long in about 1.5 seconds. It's surely terrifying. But that was nothing compared to the last job I photographed in that mill. There was a kid whose job it was to make sure that the chipper didn't get jammed. You see, there is what they call a shake table, which is like a conveyor belt of sorts, but it operates by shaking violently in such a way that material is moved along due to the vibration. It feeds pieces of cedar that were unfit for use in the roofing materials into a big slick metal chute that leads directly to the absolutely massive chipper shredder. So this guy's job is to make sure that nothing gets stuck in the mouth of the chute. Okay, right. So I'm photographing this kid as he is standing on the shake table, with no safety harness, literally above the chute that goes straight to the chipper. That chipper turns a log 2 feet long and 2 feet wide into cedar mulch in less than a half second. He would slip and slide around up there while holding a pike pole to push logs down into the chute. At times he would get out over the chute itself and kick them down with his feet. I never saw anything that insane at any other job site ever. I photographed these things at the beginning of my career almost 24 years ago. I'm still shaking remembering it today. If I've learned anything from living in BC my whole life, it's that the forestry industry is no freaking joke. Every couple years someone from my town gets taken out by an accident at a logging camp. Heck, the grade 12 citizenship award at my high school was named after a kid that received the award, went off to a camp, and was dead within a month. My boss made us serve food in an asbestos-ridden kitchen after the ceiling collapsed. Went out on a delivery some Saturday afternoon, which are usually deadly slow. Went out with some food to a bank, and when I came back the dishes were stacked up to my eyeballs. There were like 2 tables seated, so there shouldn't be so many dishes to wash. I didn't even think and jumped right into the dishwashing station, and the dishes and pans and ladles were coming in fast. The chefs don't speak much English, were all white in the face and like sad looking. I was extremely confused before I took a look around the kitchen and the fricking ceiling collapsed on the other end of room. I now know I am not an observant person. There was insulation and drywall peppered on every surface. My boss comes out, takes a drag off his cigarette and said, "We're not closing. Clean this up." I really wished a health inspector came in. Some people ate asbestos that day. Fricked up. I would have quit on the spot and called the city about that. My previous job was at a large factory with super strict safety policies. Fast forward to my first week at current job, a teeny tiny sheet metal fabrication shop. We had this table with 4 drill presses mounted to it. The one I was using was set at its highest speed and was shooting red hot steel shavings at me. I asked the guy training me if he could show me how to lower the speed. Guy uses a rolling chair to climb up onto the table, explaining that you have to manually move the belt in the top of the machine to change the speed. Then he asks me to hold the fluorescent light out of his way while he is up there, as it is hanging 3 inches above the press. I grab a broom and use it to keep the light away from his head as he works, and that's when the supervisor walks up with a horrified look on his face. I think to myself, this is it, we're getting fired for violating about 6 safety laws. The supervisor asks, "Did the belt break?" Guy yells down to him, "No, just changing the speed." Horrified look turns to relief as the supervisor explains that the machine was built in 1942, and we can't find replacement belts for it anymore, so if one breaks we're screwed. Then he causally walks away. It was then that I realized we were operating on a Darwinian system for safety, rather than any of those pesky OSHA laws. Same as every garage I've ever worked in. The most common thing is people not wearing seatbelts in their fork trucks. Fork trucks are stable, but heavy loads shift the center of gravity and change your safety triangle. How you accelerate and turn can push you into the tipping zone. Wearing your seatbelt increases the chances of you staying in place so you don't get crushed by the roll cage. Nah, I'll just be extra careful. I worked at a soup and sandwich place. Wasn't a cafe but wasn't a restaurant. A customer complained about their soup being cold, so I take it to the back and tell my sad excuse for a shift leader what was going on. She proceeds to take the Rethrum water, where we heat the soups up in bags and also clean with lime and I think bleach, and put that disgusting water in the person's cup and proceeds to serve it. I was mortified. Jesus, that's just malicious. Just mic it for 30 seconds. Lady, I understand getting frustrated when food is sent back, but it's not exactly difficult to reheat soup FFS. I guess not unsafe, but my WTF is wrong with this company moment. I worked at a water park and one of the cooks in the kitchen sliced his hand with a knife. It definitely needed stitches. Instead of taking him to the hospital, they brought him back to the first aid office that worked in. I basically just put band-aids on little kids that had scraped their knees and coached people what to do about their bloody noses. That was about the limit of our first aid without calling 911. One of the outdoor managers came into the first aid office and superglued this guy's hand. I don't know if the company was too cheap to deal with a workman's comp claim or if the guy couldn't pass the drug test you get after filing a workman's comp claim or what was going on. I understand superglue can be used to close some cuts, but this cut 10/10 needed stitches and a tetanus shot. Witnessed the following practice, then had to do it myself. Sitting on the edge of a massive block of granite, hundreds of feet from the bottom of the granite quarry, then leaning so far over the edge, 3 or 4 of my co-workers kept me from plummeting to my death by holding the ends of a strap that was wrapped around my waist. While held like this, I used a plug drill, a sort of half-size jackhammer, to bore a fist-sized hole in the granite so the dog could fit in it. Dogs are what you call the hooks that hang beneath the block and tackle on the crane. might get buried, but I actually just witnessed a few the other day. I just started working at an unnamed hazardous waste incineration facility about 2 months ago. It's a heck of an interesting place to work because we feed liquid and shredded solid waste into the 8-story unit, which vaporizes it instantly in a 1600-degree fire tornado. 4 times a year we shut down to pull everything apart and replace a bunch of parts and pieces, one of which sessions we just completed this week. Now OSHA and the EPA are about 9 fingers deep in the plant's butthole about safety, but there are tons of ways around all of their mandated measures, like lockout tagout, and it seems like our supervisors love taking those shortcuts to speed up production. My job is to mix our solid wastes in a set of giant hoppers with a clamshell crane, and then feed it into the conveyor system via another hopper. The waste is carried 6 floors up to a pair of chutes where it is then fed into the unit. As part of our shutdown procedure, we run the conveyors clean off to unplug all the waste that gets crammed in nooks and crannies. Dry waste being fed into the incinerator acts as a sort of check valve. A plug of waste about 2 feet thick prevents fire from leaving the unit and shooting a massive fireball into the building where I mix and feed. Well, early this week we ran the conveyors clean and some genius decides it's a good time to clean out the top of the waste chute while the unit is still on. It's a terrible idea, but there's a lockout procedure for a special slide gate that can cover that feed chute and close it off to be cleaned out. There's a short radio conversation between my co-worker and my supervisor discussing the merits of closing the slide gate. Said conversation ends in frick it, it'll take too long. Co-worker unbolts the 150-pound hatch, which proceeds to blow off with the force of a railgun, and the 1600-degree incinerator begins shooting 60-foot-long fireballs out of what is essentially just an airport in its side. Fire alarms go off, people freak, and we have the fire under control about half an hour later. As soon as the fire is out, my supervisor asks me to go down to the basement level of my building to see if there was any fire damage on the main conveyor. I was half suited up when one of my good co-workers stopped me and advised me to wait another half an hour, because the unit was still prone to shooting fireballs down my conveyor, which my supervisor neglected to tell me. That guy didn't even get written up, neither did my supervisor. Yikes. I saw a wild house sparrow fly into the bakery section of a supermarket, land on exposed bread and eat a bit before flying deeper into the bakery's inner workings. Not a single employee appeared to do anything. Does that count? If you saw one, there are more. Check the pet care aisle and look for birdseed. Once, I observed a trapped sparrow peck open a bag of sunflower seeds, then flit away to its hiding place up in the ceiling. 2-inch lengths of copper tubing in place of fuses. 126-degree workspace with 6-hour exposure and no one checked on the person. Frequent meetings held in 105-110 dB workspace. Human chain passing 20-pound steel rods up and down a 30-foot wet ladder in the dark. Swaying 50-foot long 2-foot wide wet. Steep stairway used to move staff and hand-carried equipment. Nurses not informing visiting adults the child they're visiting carries a skin virus that is easily communicable. I'm imagining all these are in the same place. Steel furnaces down a wet stairway right next to the contagion ward. At our cafe, we clean with white vinegar. White vinegar can be a great cleaner that is super cheap to use for day-to-day cleaning in a restaurant. Bleach is also a great way to clean floors and plastic containers, but they must be kept separate. We train them to use one for X and the other for Y. Then, you get someone who doesn't follow the rules and uses vinegar on the floors one day. It did a great job of cleaning the floors. Let's keep doing this without telling anyone that the mops are full of vinegar. This closer does this all week. The next closer sees that the mops are super dirty and decides to bleach them overnight. So, we have mops that have been in vinegar water all week and bleach water made to clean the mops. Everything seemed fine until the next morning when I arrived at work and noticed a smell. Opened the mop closet door and immediately slammed it shut. Opened the outside door as I yelled for help. I made it 5 feet before I was on the ground and couldn't do anything but cough. One lost their job that week over not being able to follow directions and almost killing their boss. It was horrible. My poor manager was running around like a chicken looking for my keys to drive me to the clinic that was less than 1/2 mile away. I was on my hands and knees crawling to try and reach the van as I watched him run around the van like a dope. Restaurant with concrete floors. Employee A cleaning floor with bleach. Employee B cleaning floor with muriatic acid. A match made in a chlorine gas egg. I used to work for a containment company and we used mesh sheets with polyurea sprayed on it for containment. In order to make the sheets, the polyurea has to be mixed in a machine which gets pumped through a hose that we use to spray the mesh sheets. We're supposed to wear respirators when we work with it, but a lot of the guys did not. Polyurea is a known carcinogen, so a lot of the guys at work were breathing in cancer-causing liquid rubber fumes. My favorite is when they would smoke and spray at the same time for that double dose of pimping cancer. One time we had to clean up the lab of recently retired professor. That included 40 years of very toxic chemicals and various states of disarray. There was also HF just in random 50 ml centrifuge tubes. After opening one cabinet, I breathed something in and had to go walk outside until I didn't feel dizzy. I put a respirator, with an expired filter, on after that. Fun times in grad school. Dude unjammed a full pallet on a rolling rack 20 feet up by pushing on it until it and the 2 pallets behind it got unstuck and started rolling towards him. He jumped back into the scissor lift before it knocked him off the edge. I don't know what the proper OSHA approved procedure would be, but I've got a hunch it's not that. He does this like twice a week. Please report him, or he will hurt himself or others. Working as an English teacher in China. I worked there from 2002 to 2014. In the last few years, it wasn't so bad, but back in 2002 to 2008 before Beijing had the Olympics, it was pretty bad. Schools would hire foreign teachers who were clearly degenerate maniacs, perverts, possible pedophiles, and not do any kind of background check, criminal record check. There were creepy 50-year-old men working with children during the day and spending all their money on prostitutes during the evenings. And if you know China at all, a fair amount of their prostitutes are underage. Now please don't put me on Arbadas or Arfathapan or whatever, but I was disciplined at my school and nearly got in trouble with the police for punching a 55-year-old Australian man in the face for saying she's a pretty girl. Look at her. She knows it in regards to an 8-year-old girl. He was eventually let go, but still continued to work after that. Insane stories. I don't even bother telling them to people because they truly seem unbelievable. Pretty much me anytime I'm on the forklift. I've also got a cord my supervisor calls the cord of death. It's a male plug on both ends for powering up these panels we work on. It saves me a few minutes each time over wiring up the panel properly. But if you unplug the wrong end first and touch it, you're going to get a little 120 volt tickle. I've got an OSHA 10 card, but all it did was tell me all of the dangerous things I did, and still do. Every dangerous job I have had ever. Okay, you should never ever do this, with detailed explanation how to do it. Separated by this is honestly freaking lethal. Run if in doubt. Things that you actually never ever should do cause someone explodes or burns. Oh man. I used to work for specialty food produce company as a graphic designer photographer. I often had to go into the giant warehouse to get the products to take pictures of, including produce. The rule was if I didn't have to cut the fruit open after I took the picture, I would bring it back to the warehouse where they would put it back in the case to sell. This was borderline unhygienic, but was okay until I got whopping cough. The company had no paid sick leave and I could not afford to take time off. I was at work. I told my boss and company heads that I was very sick and that whopping cough was contagious for a while. Even while I started treatment, they told me that I had to come to work or I would get fired. I told them that if I had to be at work, then I should probably just stay in my office away from people, and I definitely shouldn't go into the warehouse to handle food, and that food absolutely should not be put back to sell. No go. I asked for a face mask and gloves. They said, maybe next quarter. I still had to go into the warehouse every day coughing and hacking and spreading my illness all over the produce that then went out all over the country and into people's mouths. TLDR. I spread whopping cough because my company is horrible. For the love of God, report them to OSHA or maybe the CDC. I worked as a manager in an aquarium some time ago. The treatment of the animals due to lack of funding was appalling. We once had to euthanize an 8-foot conger eel. Burst swim bladder, but hadn't enough of the necessary chemical. The poor animal got dragged out, put head first in large wheelie bin half full of water which then had around 200 Alka-Seltzer dumped in, then just left locked away for 3 days. We also had no method of disposing of the body, so they wheeled it down the pier and chucked it off. Jesus Christ, at that point it's more humane to beat its head in. Worked on an oil tanker for a brief stint. Chief officer told me in the same day to work in an enclosed space, full of fumes, easy to die, without filling in a permit to work, legal requirement, or allowing me to use the equipment for checking atmosphere, and to work on top of the crane. No work permit for working at height either, without a harness. Never working on a tanker again, freaking death traps. Currently on a towel ship, much nicer here. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.